whenever I'm going to see an old band like that play, I don't like to be disappointed, right? So I try to keep my expectations low. When I'm seeing a band that's really old, I try to prepare myself mentally for them to be washed up has-beens, for them to have not kept themselves in tip-top performing shape. Do you fear the Reaper? Because Blue Oyster Cult sure doesn't. I mean, those guys are old as dirt. They're still touring around the country, playing rock and roll, doing their thing. And they sound surprisingly fresh while they do it. And you know these guys. You know Blue Oyster Cult. You know more Cowbell.
I got a fever. And the only prescription is more cowbell. Don't
Fear the Reaper. Burning for You. You've heard these songs. You've heard them before. They're on the radio. They're in movies. They're in TV. But, Blue Oyster Cult, they're not really regarded as one of the very greats. They're not talked about like they're Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath or the Beatles or anything, but they've had some mainstream success, they've had some popularity, and they've been influential in rock and roll, even beyond the tracks you might have heard. They've had a lot of influence, and they have a lot of material that's really, really good that might not get its due credit. But I gotta say, man, I was pleasantly surprised by their set. And, many bands that are the same age as Blue Oyster Cult, they met their demise long ago. Or, their reanimated corpses are going around playing in musty casinos and at little county fairs, for old people who are stuck in the past. But Blue Oyster Cult, they were at a heavy metal music festival in Las Vegas, playing alongside the likes of Converge and High on Fire and Tribulation. And that may sound out of place for a band like Blue Oyster Cult, for the band that did Burnin' For You to be playing the same night as a band like Converge. That might sound really strange, but it may surprise you to know that they actually, they've made a lot of occult rock and proto-metal stuff that was really influential for the metal genre. They made a lot of stuff that was pretty heavy for the time, in like the early and mid 1970s. I mean, Black Sabbath inspired riffs in songs like Cities on Flame with rock and roll and Godzilla, along with some really up-tempo, high-energy hard rock tracks like Hot Rails to Hell. So when you consider songs like that, maybe they don't sound so out of place at a festival that also has bands like Sleep and Fu Manchu and Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats and Elder and stuff like that. And I like Blue Oyster Cult. I wouldn't consider myself a huge fan, maybe a bigger fan than the average person. I really like their songs, but I wouldn't consider myself a big Blue Oyster Cult fan. But I knew I wanted to catch their set at this festival because, damn it, I wanted to hear Don't Fear the Reaper live. I wanted to be able to say that I saw this classic band perform before they hung it up for good. But I wouldn't say that my expectations were high. I mean, the guys have been together for 50 years, and whenever I'm going to see an old band like that play, I don't like to be disappointed, right? So I try to keep my expectations low. When I'm seeing a band that's really old, I try to prepare myself mentally for them to be washed up has-beens, for them to have not kept themselves in tip-top performing shape. Blue Oyster Cult obviously kept themselves in shape. I mean, they didn't look as old as I thought they would. They were old, but, they looked pretty good. They looked good for their age. It's amazing what, nice, good-fitting clothes and sunglasses and hair dye can do for your appearance at that age. And they sounded great, too. Honestly, I was kind of blown away by their set. Blue Oyster Cult, they're a 5-piece band, and their players are really versatile. That's one thing I really noticed and took away from their show is they're versatile players. Sometimes they've got 4 guitarists up on stage. Sometimes it's 2 keyboard players. They've got multiple vocalists who can hit all the notes, and they make these great harmonies, and the mix balances the instruments and the vocals really well. You can hear everything. It sounds clear. It sounds great. I mean, these guys really are pros. That's the thing. They're pros. And I thought that maybe the years would have been unkind to them, but seemingly the 50 years of them touring and playing shows together has just made them sharper, more refined performers, which may be how you think it should go most of the time. You know, you play so many concerts for so many years, you would think you get better and better at it, but actually it seems like that's rarely the case. It seems like over time, all that touring and the hard lifestyle, you know, people's performances decline as they age, at least, I mean, definitely in athletics and seemingly in entertainment too, but not for these guys. I mean, it seems like they were so good, I imagine, that they have really fine-tuned and dialed in every aspect of their performance and has gotten it to be about as good as it can be, right? I mean, it was really, really nice. And you know, it really did feel like the band was having a lot of fun with it. It genuinely felt like they enjoyed being on stage together and playing their music for the audience. And the audience responded in kind. I mean, the vibes were good. It just seemed like everybody was having fun. Seemed like the band was in the zone and they knew it and everybody knew it. Everybody could feel and feed off this energy of like, these guys are in the zone. Like, these guys, these old guys on stage, been playing rock and roll since the 70s. Yeah, they've actually still got something. At one point, they pulled out this badass guitar that was like white and had craters on it. It looked like the moon, and they made all these wicked sounds with it. It was amazing. I mean, there are so many aspects of the show that blew me away. And mind you, this is a weekend where I was seeing like 30 bands, and a lot of these bands I was really excited to see. But Blue Oyster Cult, despite me only knowing like a few of their songs, and yeah, I liked them, but I wasn't as excited about them as plenty of other bands on the bill. But you know, I came away from this weekend with Blue Oyster Cult being one of the highlights, being one of the bands that I was most glad that I saw. I mean, they really put on a spectacular show that stood out from the crowd. And the setlist was really tight and fantastic, quite frankly. They opened with the Red and the Black, so right out of the gate, you know, they come out with a very high energy, high aura performance. It's got a bass solo, it's got a guitar solo in it, and it got the crowd riled up. You know, people were dancing and jumping around and moshing and banging their heads. The fucking Blue Oyster Cult, right? Then they went into their classic, the golden age of leather, you know, the raise your can of beer up high. And then after that, you know, they did Burnin' For You, which they played perfectly, and everybody sang along to it, and it sounded fantastic. It sounded better than I could have expected. Really, so right out of the gate with those three songs, they came out swinging. They came out on a really high note. They came out letting the audience know that they've still got it, that they've got more than you probably thought that they had, and that we were all in for a really great performance and a really great night. They played some kind of deeper cuts too. I'll never forget, between songs, my buddy yelled out, "Tattoo Vampire!" And bam, they went right into that song, and he was stoked. And you know, that song went really hard too, harder than you might expect from Blue Oyster Cult. They played some deeper cuts like that, and then, you know, obviously they're gonna close out with some of their biggest hits, and that's exactly what they did. The last two songs they played were Godzilla, and then of course Don't Fear the Reaper, which was played to absolute perfection. And you know, Don't Fear the Reaper, it's a classic for a reason, folks. It's a really, really terrific song. I love that song. It's really good. And to hear it live, it did not disappoint. I mean, they performed it to perfection. So the vibe, the sound, the performance, the music, it was immaculate. I mean, really, hats off, round of applause for Blue Oyster Cult. I mean, I figured I'd enjoy the show, but they did a lot more with it than I thought that they would. And you know, it's kind of funny, before the show, we were next to these two really old guys, and there's this one really old guy, he had sunglasses on. He looked almost too old to be there, really, at a heavy metal music festival. He looked probably a little too old to be there, but he was this really old guy with sunglasses. He was just standing there kind of aloof. And then the guy next to him was also pretty old, and he was just talking this guy up, this really old guy with sunglasses that was just kind of there. His buddy was talking him up like he was a legend, like he was like a really famous guy, and he was talking about like, yeah, this guy's really, really happy to be there. Of course, he had to come out to see Blue Oyster Cult. He's friends with the band. I think he might have said he worked with the band in some capacity, like as a producer or a guest musician or a collaborator of some sort. I don't quite remember, but he said he knew the band, was friends with the band, yada, 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 and he came out to see him and was really excited. And this guy, he was like some big time. He did like a bunch of autopsies in Las Vegas and was like a consultant on CSI, the show that shot in Las Vegas. And he also did music, and his name was Skinner Rat, like the Skinner Rat experiments. This guy was just saying everything about his friend and talking him up like he invented airplanes or something. It was kind of, it's kind of cute. I mean, this guy was a great friend, a great hype man for his buddy Skinner Rat. And that's how I want my friends to be. And I demand that from now on. That is now expected of my friends. You better be talking me up like I cured cancer or something. Like, oh, this guy? This guy, nobody. He got lunch for Zach Baggins a couple times. Whoa! He used to plan shoot schedules for the Real Housewives of Dubai. Oh my God! He did like a bunch of production logistics for Street Outlaws. Whoa! That's how I should be talked about. Like, hey, take your hat off. Show some respect. Only nobody gets to wear hats. That's how I want my buddies to talk about me, like Skinner Rat's buddy was talking about him. I'm really glad that I got to meet the great Skinner Rat. I'm glad that Skinner Rat, got to see Blue Oyster Cult and that they put on such a great performance for him. I mean, it was really, really a beautiful night in Las Vegas that night. I'll never forget it. So anyway, yeah, I would definitely recommend seeing Blue Oyster Cult live if you get the chance, even if you're only a fan of like one or two of their songs, even if you only know Don't Fear the Reaper and Burnin' For You. I would still recommend seeing them because they play those songs like perfectly, and it's a great experience to hear those classics played live so well, to hear everybody singing along with those songs, but also they may surprise you with how good some of their other material is. I mean, they play a really, really fun, high energy, great sounding set from start to finish, and it's really worth the experience, I would say. So even if you barely know who Blue Oyster Cult is, I would say if you get a chance to see them, go check them out because they really do put on a great show.